Looks like we are starting. There we are, and we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Room podcast. We are in a new series that we just started a couple of weeks ago called Off Script. And the premise behind Off Script is we're talking to a variety of wonderful people, many of whom I have met here on Substack, where many of you are joining us live. It will be later available on my Substack and hopefully my guests as well as the Blue Room podcast feed. But the thought behind Off Script is talking to people about the ways that the world tries to put us in certain boxes that are not built for many of us, and the ways that we can get free, and the ways that work frees all of us to live more abundantly and fruitfully and authentically. And so I am really thrilled today to have my guest, Joelle Henneman. Joelle writes at Trans Preacher on Substack, but I understand you have a multiple home bases on the internet. So, Joelle, welcome. We're glad you're here. And just tell us where people can find you and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm a pastor at the United Methodist Church for All People in Columbus, Ohio. Um, as you mentioned, I have a trans preacher on Substack as well as on Facebook and Instagram and Blue Sky, transpreacher.com. And I got um, good news. Last week, I signed a contract with Abingdon Press. Going to be publishing a book on a theology of gender that is very much outside the box, as you would say. So
Excellent.
I'm really excited by that opportunity.
Congratulations. That's
Thanks.
wonderful. So welcome to soon to be the world of or have you written a book before, or is this going to be your
Yeah,
first?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's your first?
No, I've
Oh, you've
published
written one
before.
before.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Does the new book have a title yet, or is it
The
still TBD?
title is Imago Dei.
Oh
In
my gosh.
theology, one of the core concepts of theology is Imago Dei, that we are all created in God's image, and this book is Imago Dei, and it really makes the argument that God is diverse and God creates in diversity, and that we've been conditioned to read the Bible through lenses of patriarchy and misogyny um, and if we take those lenses off, we see that God is very diverse, that the Bible is full of stories of all kinds of queer people, and and people like me reflect something unique about the image of God.
Oh my gosh. I cannot wait for that book, Joelle. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for living it in your work and in your very being. And I also, as someone who really struggles with titles, I don't know whether you came up with that title or if it
Yeah,
was a collaboration with Abingdon, but
no.
I am so
In fact,
jealous of that title. It's
I was
so
so
good.
happy because many times authors don't get to choose their title,
Yes.
and especially if you're a relatively unknown author like me. And when they sent the contract for me to look at, they had my title suggestion on it, and that was the thing that made me happiest about the contract is, yes.
Yes, it's a great affirmation, right? That they
Yeah,
understand what you're trying to do. You have a
yeah,
shared vision. Oh my gosh.
yeah,
That is fantastic. Well, best to you in that
thank you.
writing journey. You've obviously been there before, so
Yeah,
you know how that
a
goes.
year ago, I published a book on, last year, I graduated with a Doctor of Ministry from Pacific School of Religion, and I published this book that's available on Amazon. Uh, it really centers on getting people to see their own giftedness. I
Mhm.
think especially for LGBT people, we can spend so much time being defensive and arguing against the clobber passages that we miss the unique gifts and opportunities that we can bring into the world.
Mm.
And so this book looks at what unique gifts do LGBT people bring to preaching, to pastoral care, to social justice, to social media, and how can we operate from that giftedness instead of defensiveness?
Mm, fantastic. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm so grateful for your words, and I already am grateful for the ways that that new book and your current book will bless the world. So thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. So you went to where did you do your seminary work? Those of you who have joined us, let us geek out a little bit, pastor to pastor. But where did you? So you got your doctor of ministry from Pacific, but where did
Yeah.
you do your M?
Bright Divinity School
Oh
that's,
yeah,
in Fort Worth. It's on
right.
the Texas Christian University campus.
Yes,
And also, at both schools, I had just really wonderful experiences.
that's great.
Both schools very much center their identity on being inclusive of LGBT people. Both had amazing professors and scholarship, and I just really loved those environments.
That's great. I'm so glad it was an affirming experience.
Yeah.
I'm from Texas originally,
Okay.
so I'm glad to know of that connection. So, well, in this series, I have kind of a list of questions that I bring to folks, but you get two pastors together, who knows where we're going to end up? But we'll
Texas
start
Half
with.
Hour just to do the introduction.
That's right. I know. That's right. So let's start. And the first question that I like to ask people is talk about a time that you realized you were not living the dominant script, that there is a
Mm.
kind of understanding of the way humans are supposed to be or live or move in the world, and you knew that was not you. And was that a sudden moment? Was it a slow dawning? Just whatever you'd like to share about that experience.
I think that's been the experience of my whole life. I'm in a meeting right now. That's been the experience of my whole life. I'm an adopted child. I was adopted when I was about 3 months old, and, um, my parents who raised me were very loving people, um, but I'm very different than my parents,
Mhm.
just as far as personality and beliefs and things like that. Um, just last week, I was emailing with my mom, and she wrote me back and said, "You've always marched to the beat of your own drummer, and that's what makes you wonderful."
Mm,
So I think I've always felt a bit as an outsider. When I was in school, I didn't really fit in with the jocks or the preps or the different groups of students. And I've always kind of found community on the margins. Initially, when I was, a teenager in school, it was through punk rock. I'm an old punk rocker, and that
nice.
became my network of friends. And I've preached about this before. I grew up in a very conservative Lutheran church, Missouri Synod background. And the first time I heard a call to social justice, it was not from the church I grew up in. It was from the Dead Kennedys and the Clash um,
Excellent.
and people calling. I learned about slumlords and economic injustice and racial injustice through punk rock.
Yeah.
So you know, I, I I think I've always had kind of an element of that in my life. Again, maybe it starts with being adopted, but always feeling a little bit more on the outside. And to this
Mhm.
day, I'm more comfortable on working from the outside. Like when we do um, in justice work, we often talk about the inside game and the outside game,
Mm,
and I can do either. But I really like being the kind of outside voice, and I think that's where Christianity is really at its best, is when it can speak from the margins and call, the powers of the world into account, um, rather than speaking from the center of power. Um,
mhm. Absolutely. I'm curious, given that orientation towards speaking from the margins, which I agree that that seems to me, as we look at the witness of Jesus, that is where he spent his time
Mhm,
and where he spoke with love and with justice, and those holding those together. You serve a church in the United
mhm,
Methodist Church, correct?
mhm.
So
Yeah.
how do you, I think we all have that. I'm in a Presbyterian Church USA
Mhm.
congregation, and always have been in my ordained life, but how do you hold that kind of desire to be prophetic and speak from the margins when you're kind of flat in the middle of a mainline denomination? How does that kind of work on a practical basis?
I think throughout my life, I've always found my little niche or place where I can authentically be me within a larger structure. Before going into ministry, I was in the Air Force for 20 years. Um,
No kidding.
and
Wow.
most of that time I worked as a historian. So I kind of had my own little thing going on.
Yes.
Um, and I found ways to be authentic in that. And yes, I am a United Methodist pastor. Um, and I often find that it, maybe this also touches on your first question. It's often hard for me to find my place in the world because I'm a pastor and I'm a queer person. But many times other people in the church world don't know what to do with me because I'm queer. And many of my queer friends are like, how are you a pastor? How can you be a part of that? So I'm somewhat of an anomaly in both sides.
Yes.
Um, but I serve a church that's in a mixed income community, in a neighborhood that's about a third African American. Our worship services on Sunday are about half black, half white. About two-thirds people who live in poverty, about a third middle class and above. And right outside my office right now, there's over 100 people waiting to shop in our free store that's a free thrift shop.
Wow.
We have a free fresh food market that sees about 350 to 400 people a day.
Mm.
Um, and those are only two of our programs. And all the people that come to participate in our programs call me pastor. They may not be here on Sunday, they may not be Christian, um, but when stuff goes down in their life, they're in my office. Uh,
Mm.
and so I get to be in deep relationship with this really beautiful community,
Mm.
and I'm also on the board for Reconciling Ministries Network. That's the part of the United Methodist Church that works for LGBT inclusion. I'm the director of the United Methodist Alliance for Transgender Inclusion. So, um, you know, in our United Methodist structure, in a month, it will be annual conference season.
Right. Yes.
And you will find me at the justice table
Nice.
handing out opportunities for people to engage in justice work. Um,
Excellent.
and
That's
and you won't find me like front and center on the stage.
yes.
Um,
There you go.
and I'm not disparaging anybody who does that because that's also an important role. But I think in this work we all have our places and our roles. And I've been able to find the one that is consistent with who I am.
Hmm. I'm curious, and you can get into as little or as much detail as you would like, but did you transition before becoming a pastor, or what?
Now, I've been here, um, at this church for the last 11 years, and I started transitioning, 5 or 6 years ago. And so they knew me, under my previous name. They knew me when I had a beard, and they know me now.
Yeah.
And, it's been really, unexpectedly beautiful and powerful. Um, like I said, we have a free, thrift shop here. So people who are sorting things in the thrift shop know my style and know my size. And quite often, I'll come in and there'll be a dress or something draped over my chair, because somebody was sorting clothes and thought, "Oh, this will look good on Pastor Joelle."
Oh, that's
Um,
so beautiful.
and I had the misconception that people in a, um, largely African American neighborhood and people in poverty would struggle with accepting me, and that has not been the case.
Mm.
And we've come to say that nobody in this neighborhood has ever done me wrong. Uh,
Mm.
and people look out for me, people provide for me. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
it's been really beautiful.
I'm really glad to hear that. You've, I'm sure, heard the phrase, "It's hard to hate up close," and I
Yeah,
think that a lot
yeah,
of our culture wars are so clearly there's an agenda to kind of control and polarize, and when you are in community with one another, it's
yeah,
just much harder to fall prey to that and
yeah.
say, "But I know people.
Even
This doesn't
people
sound
who
right."
even people who left the church after I came out,
Mm,
said to me, "You've always been a good pastor to me. You've always been caring. I can't continue with you,
mm,
because of my beliefs or my culture,
mhm,
but you've always been good to me."
mm, mm. Do you hear that as, like, that's, um, how do I it feels like they're trying to be as gracious as they can
Mhm.
be given
Right.
their own
Yeah.
whatever their perspective is, which
Yeah.
there's something maybe hopeful in that, I suppose, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so, well, that's lovely. Well, what would you say? I mean, there are many things that you lifted up as kind of the sort of living not in the boxes that we construct for one another. But
Mhm.
what are some of the hard things about living off script, as we're putting it in this series, in a
Mhm.
world that wants to keep
Yeah.
handing us the script? What's challenging about that?
Um, I think it's easier for me because, as I described, I feel like I've lived off script my whole life
Mm,
from the moment I was born.
yeah.
And so I'm used to living off script, but I think for a lot of people, they've lived their lives on script. They've done what the world around them has told them to do. And so when someone like me comes along, it butts up against,
Mhm.
how can you do this? This is not what it's supposed to be. And one of the interesting things that particularly people who've struggled with accepting my identity, that I've heard is sometimes people say, I just can't understand. I just struggle to understand. Like, I can't understand your transition. And my word back to them is, you don't have to understand. Um, I could never understand what it's like to be from another country. I could never understand what it's like to be an African American person and identity in America. I could never understand, or I don't yet understand what it's like to be a senior citizen. But you don't have to understand to show kindness and compassion and love to someone.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people I live in deep relationship with, and I would never pretend to have their experiences.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
And
That's so nice.
we don't have to understand. We
Mhm.
just have to
Mhm.
see the humanity and the divinity in each person.
Yeah. Ah, it's beautifully said. For those who are not aware, this series that I conceived of conversations are in conjunction with the book that I just released called Better Than Normal. And what I try to do in there is lift up a value of the current world as it is, which does put people into these very rigid kind of categories and put us in and out and all of this. And how could we what is an antidote to those values, right? And so the first one, as you were talking, that came to my mind was the first value I lift up is certainty. You know, that life looks a certain
Mhm.
way, and if you follow the rules, things are predictable, and life is unpredictable and wildly um, uh, uh, powerful in the ways that God confounds our understandings. And the
Mhm.
antidote to certainty is curiosity. And
Mhm.
as you were talking, I think we don't need to understand, but what would it be like to just say, "What is this like for you?" Rather
Mhm.
than saying, "I need to know it all."
Mhm.
Just to say, "I don't understand, and I can
Yeah.
understand a little." Like you're right, you'll never understand fully what it means to be an African American living in America, but through your relationships, you know a little better
Mhm.
than
Mhm.
people who are closed off. So I love the idea of curiosity as a better value than and even better than understanding is just, yeah, tell me what you see
Mhm.
from where you
Yeah.
sit.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and curiosity, as I was researching the book, the word curiosity relates to the word for care.
Mm.
And so,
Mm.
like, I
Mm.
care
Oh, I
enough
love
to
that. I
wonder
never
about
heard that
you.
before. I love
Yeah,
that.
I hadn't either.
Wow.
I
Huh.
love that. So
Mm.
um, I wanna lift up you've already gotten a shout out in the chat, just the powerful and beautiful way, like, we don't have to understand, just
Yeah.
see the humanity and divinity in others. I wanna underscore that because I think that's so beautiful, which brings us into my next question is there a I mean, you've lived with this your whole life, and
Mhm.
so in some ways, this kind of being a little on the outside or margins or looking from
Mhm.
a different perspective is maybe native to you in some ways. But is there a value or is there a practice that you lean on when life doesn't conform to expectation or when you are butting up against people's expectations of you? What helps you through? What are some values or practices that you draw on?
Um, I think for me, seeing that in my understanding, these are the kind of very spaces that God works.
Yeah.
In the first sentences of Genesis, it says, God's spirit pours over the waters of the deep and creates out of chaos.
Ah,
Pentecost is coming up, and there's this chaotic moment of people speaking in different languages. And when I was working on my doctorate, I got to interview um, a playwright named Joe Clifford, who has written a play called Jesus, Queen of Heaven, that portrays Jesus as a transgender woman. And it's been
wow.
performed all over the world, both to much adoration and much protest.
I
Um,
imagine.
and when I interviewed her, she said, you know, God is doing something new through people like us. God is expanding our human understanding of gender. The gender is not just uh, male and female and locked in from the time the doctor says who you are,
Yeah.
and that every time God is doing a new thing, people are going to push back against it.
Mhm.
People are going to resist it. The people in the culture, the society, the world. When you push the boundaries, someone's going to try and hold those boundaries into place.
Yeah.
And so I think I try and remember that in the back of my mind,
Mhm.
um, that what's happening in my life, I believe, is the work of God, the work of the Holy Spirit. I was miserable the first 50 plus years of my life. I couldn't stand to look in a mirror. Um, I hated the hair growing on my body. I didn't identify with my name, and God loved me too much to leave me in that kind of place.
Mhm.
Uh, and I believe my transformation is not only for me, but as the pastor of a place called Church for All People, it's expanded who we understand as all people.
Mm. Gosh, I just wanna sit with that because it's so just beautifully embodied and beautifully stated, and for those the 2 of us who seek to follow Jesus. It's what
Mhm.
he was brought here to do,
Right.
is to set
And
people free.
and, as, a person of faith, pretty much every time in the Bible, um, God, Jesus, an angel called somebody to do something, it was pretty darn inconvenient.
Yes, that's
And
true.
it meant people upending their lives and living in new ways.
Hmm.
And, I guess that's both an honor, to be doing that, and it's incredibly inconvenient sometimes,
Yes, it is
and
not
it's
easy.
it's not easy.
Yeah.
And when I started transitioning 5 years ago, um, I knew there were individuals who would not be excited or supportive. I had no idea 5 years ago that people like me would become the topic of national debate, national politics,
Right.
uh, thousands of laws proposed across the country. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
last week the White House put out a counterterrorism report uh, that listed transgender people right next to and along with terrorists and drug cartels.
Yeah.
I never imagined as a military veteran I would find who I am as a target of our own government.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
where I am now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for naming that. And I am so glad that you have a community around you that can lift up, um, what I see as the truth of the matter, which is that, we are all created in God's image.
That's right.
And I'm curious if you, one of the things that I believe, it's kind of like I believe, help my unbelief. I believe
Mhm.
this, and I want to believe it, that what we are experiencing is, there it is. Tell us what that is, and then I'll tell you what I.
This is from that scripture you just quoted.
Yes, I see pistia, which is
Yeah,
believe, right?
in
Okay.
Greek, the letters in pink or red that almost look like riot is belief,
Yes.
and apistia, including the vowels at the ends,
Uh-huh.
make it unbelief.
Oh my gosh. That's some brilliant ink you have there. All right, I'm jealous of your book title and I'm jealous of your tattoo. So, what I was gonna say is, what I believe and also need to believe more fully and want to believe, help my unbelief, is that I feel like what we are experiencing right now is a very serious but predictable backlash against the progress that is happening and is in many ways unstoppable. It is, and thanks be to God for it, that we are on a, I mean, this is King's arc of the
Mhm.
moral universe, right? That
Right.
in some ways, and I just saw a thing that was talking about, attitudes towards trans people and whether they deserve protections, and it remains pretty high, that people, I think there's a kind of sense of decency and fairness, and these horrible laws are in many ways a counter and a backlash to where I think a lot of people are, which is like, okay, this doesn't impact my life
Right.
in any way. But I'm curious how you understand this moment that we are in, and if I imagine it's hard to feel that sometimes when it's you
Yeah.
that is being made a political football out of, or
Yeah.
worse. But
And
I'm
and
curious.
I when I was in the, Air Force, I was a historian, so I'm also a student of history
Ah, right.
and agree with what you're saying. Like, after the Civil War, we initially had Reconstruction,
Mhm.
and then that there was a backlash of Jim Crow.
Yep.
After the civil rights of the 1960s, we have the backlash of Richard Nixon and all that he brought.
Mhm.
So unfortunately, this is what we do as a country.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and it's different because um, it's closer to home. It feels more personal.
sure.
I have a very dear friend of mine who we met when I was in the Air Force, and he got blown up in Iraq and has very debilitating PTSD.
Mm,
And I was with him the day after uh, Trump got elected again. And he said, "This is not what I sacrificed for." Like,
mm,
he's given up his life in the name of freedom. And as a military veteran, um,
mhm,
and I deployed 5 times, I have 3 campaign credits. And to watch um, the not only the anti-trans legislation, to watch ICE in our neighborhood, to watch Black lives continue to not matter, to watch the economic polarization of our culture.
yeah.
It's surreal. I lived in, um, I was stationed in South Korea and, was not that far from North Korea. I was in West Germany when the Berlin Wall came down, and it's unbelievable to me that we are doing many of the things that we criticized other nations for doing. And so
Yeah.
it's very surreal to be in this moment.
Mm, mhm. Yeah. And I imagine, as it does for me, um, you talked about being a student of history and a student of American history, but you're also a student of um, biblical history,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
and that I'm thinking, yeah, as you said, we're moving into Pentecost, which is that story about the birth of the church and the way that it has so often, or at least in the beginning, was a countercultural
Mhm.
movement, and so
Yeah.
much of the liberation that they worked for, they would not see in
Mhm.
their lifetimes. I find that oddly heartening, I guess. I mean, I'd love to
Yeah.
see, like, I'm ready to get there. I'm ready to
Yeah.
see the promised land, whatever that
Yeah.
looks like. But in some ways, I mean, you do this in the work that you do right where you are. Is we do the work because it's the work that's ours to do, regardless of whether we're successful. Like, I'll put that in
Right.
air quotes because what does it even mean?
Mhm.
So but, yeah, this is the hope that I am living in, is that,
Yeah.
that we are on the verge. The level of the backlash is commensurate with the progress that we have made and will continue to make, that it is
Mhm.
unstoppable, regardless of how much, some want to try. And that is not at all to minimize that there are
Mhm.
individuals who are and will suffer, in the midst of it. So we have to mitigate that harm as much as we can. Um,
And and for the first time in my life, um, I wonder for my own safety and well-being, and I never thought I'd be in that place, um, both from the federal level, and from the state level. Here in Ohio, there's a bill, waiting for our state senate to work on, that our house approved, that claims to limit drag performances to adult-only venues, but it defines a drag performer as anyone who wears clothing or makeup different than their gender assigned at birth. Um, So if I'm preaching a sermon on a Sunday morning and there's someone under 18 in the church,
mm,
if this law passes, first offense, I'd be committing a misdemeanor. Second offense, I'd be committing a felony. So, uh,
yeah.
yeah, it's no longer just theory at this
Mhm.
point.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's
And
the.
that's also been a movement for me. Um, I was born the most privileged person on the world, a white male American,
Mhm.
and grew up in a conservative church where I think I was conditioned to read scripture from the perspective of whoever the winner in the story is, right?
Right.
Like we see ourselves in the person who did the right thing in the story,
Mhm.
and, particularly, post-transition, um, I now see myself in the people who are marginalized in the biblical stories, and that gives me, a different vantage point.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, before we close up, I have, one question before the final one that I ask,
Mhm.
which is you mentioned earlier, and it's funny because the first person in the series said a similar thing. He's a pastor who serves a Korean community, and he says, I'm too conservative for this group and too progressive for this one." And,
Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you say to folks, in the queer community who are like, "You're a pastor? How do you do that?" I'm sure you've had to answer that question,
Mhm.
but what do you say when people bring that up?
Um, I guess it kinda depends on the person and the situation.
Yeah.
Um, I've been, uh, dating somebody for over a year who's, Jewish by heritage, but more atheist in belief, and, when we started dating, and she said, "Well, what do you do?"
And you're like, "Okay, here we go."
Here we go. But then she came and saw, like, we feed hundreds of people a day. We've provided $150 million of affordable housing in our neighborhood. We accompany women to have successful birth outcomes. Like,
Mhm.
this this person who's an atheist has become a defender of what I do and who we are. um,
Yes.
um, and also, I get it. Um,
Mhm.
Even the term Christian has become so connected with Christian nationalism, with exclusionary, right wing Christianity, that if I'm in a social context with people who don't know me, I won't be quick to say I'm a Christian
Mm.
because that word carries,
Yeah.
in our culture, carries a weight, that doesn't reflect who I am.
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah. Well, letting your actions speak,
yeah,
and living that gospel with integrity is a
and I
beautiful
and I
answer
think
to that.
there's a real tension, at any time between, do you stay in an organization to bring change, or do you say, "I'm out of here"?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
when I first went into the Air Force, all the leadership were, Vietnam veterans
Mhm.
who said over and over again, "War is a last resort after every political avenue has been fully expended."
Yes.
And as those people retired and a new group of people came, by the early 2000s, I heard high-ranking general officers openly joking about, "Let's go blow stuff up and kill people."
Mm.
And I was like, "This organization and I have gone in different directions,
Yes.
and it's
Right.
time for me to go,"
Mhm.
because I didn't feel like I could make any effective change.
Right.
Um, in the United Methodist Church, I've been fortunate and being able to be a part of the work
Mhm.
of, building a more inclusive church. And 2 years ago at this time, uh, as a denomination, we voted by over 90% majority to remove restrictions on LGBT people being in ministry. We can legally perform same sex weddings.
Mhm.
Um, and it wasn't that long ago. It didn't look like things were going to go that
Yeah.
direction, but they
Yeah.
did.
Mm.
So I do think there's a fair critique of, are you continuing in an institution, that's unjust or doing harm to people? And there's a tension of, am I willing to be part of this or and bring change? Do I see hope for change, or do I need to say, I can't
Mhm.
continue with this organization?
Yeah. That's such an important distinction. Yeah. Yeah. Last question. And thank you for this beautiful
Oh,
conversation,
sure.
Joelle.
Yeah.
I've so
Yeah.
enjoyed getting to know you, and I love following your work. And
Yeah, we could do this all day. I love this.
oh yeah, we so could. So final question: what would you say to someone who is right now finding themselves, perhaps suddenly, in the middle of this gap between who they are and who our culture expects them to be, or wants to shove them into?
Yeah.
What is your advice? Or if you're not an advice person,
Yeah.
what would you say in response?
You have to be yourself. If you're not being true to who you are, the only person you hurt is you. Um, I'm a big fan of the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, and he wrote a book called The Sickness Unto Death. And in that book, despair is the sickness unto death. And the cause of despair is living a false self, pretending to be somebody who you aren't. Um, and the antidote to that is living as your true, authentic self. And, Carl Jung wrote about the same thing. Richard Rohr has written about the same thing. These aren't new ideas. Um, but the person you hurt most in the world by not being your authentic self is you, and it causes so much shame, guilt, regret. Um, and the other side of it is just so life giving. Um, I love myself more today than I ever have. Um, I had top surgery a month ago, and
I saw that. Congratulations.
thank you. And I went into it doing it for physical reasons. I wanted to look proportional in my body. I wanted to be able to look nice in a dress. But it's meant so much more to me than anything physical. Um, just how I carry myself, how I see myself. I feel so much more empowered and so much more alive.
Mm,
So Kierkegaard also talks about givenness, that who we're created to be is our givenness, and that we thrive, we become alive when we live into that givenness. And to keep a mask on and to never experience that is to not be alive.
mm,
Um,
mhm.
if we want, Jesus said, "I came to give you life and give it to you abundantly."
That's exactly what
We
I just thought of, Joelle.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
if we want to experience abundant life, we have to take off the mask and we have to be authentic. That's the
Mm.
only way to get there.
Yes. Amen, and we're going to leave it there because that is good preachers know when to conclude, right? That is what an amazing, note to finish on. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Joelle Henneman. You can find her at Trans Preacher, which is transpreacher.com. Is that
Sure.
the website? But
Yeah,
also
that's
on
the website.
Substack.
Mhm.
And look for, Imago They, which again, brilliant title. I cannot wait to read it. So, do you know when, like, I mean, I
No,
know
it'll
these
be a
things take a
while.
while.
It takes a while.
Yeah, religious publishing
Yes.
is a little pokier than the big Random House,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. But blessings to you in the writing and in the work you're doing there at the Church for All People. Yes?
Thank you. Yes, thank
United
you.
Methodist congregation in Columbus, you said?
Yeah, Columbus, Ohio.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes when this posts later. But again, thank you so much,
Oh,
Joelle. This
thank
was a
you.
wonderful
Appreciate it. Thank
conversation.
you for the invitation.
Blessings. We'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye. Peace.